Good morning, everyone. You are welcome to week 7 of this design training, and for this week, we'll be looking at layout and composition. So, this is the introduction part, and the reason why we have layout and composition is design is to ensure organized information for our design. And like I said, a good design is organized thinking. In other words, good design is a reflection of the thought process of the designer. Good design shows how well organized the design is. Now, for layout and composition, we'll be looking at three major things: visual hierarchy, grids, and white space. And there's a visual example here by the right. The credit here goes to Matthew Cruz on X. You can see this is for the Nestle Milo brand, and they have all their products being outlined in the flyer. And this is a good example of the use of layout and composition in design. You can see the way the images all add beauty to the design, and the use of text is being properly used here in this design as well. And now, what is layout? Layout is basically the arrangement of visual elements. So layout is how your elements appear on a piece of design. And the examples of elements that appears in layout are text, images, buttons, shapes, and spacing. And there's a visual example here by the right. The credit goes to Kyle Anthony on X. We can see the proper use of layouts in this design. You can see axe ops as the text. There is proper spacing in between the elements. There are no images, but there are some shapes. You can see the rectangle shapes here, and everything is properly done, and it aligns well. So layout is how your elements appear on a piece of design, the way you arrange your elements on a piece of design. So now, what is composition? Composition is how elements work together visually. Like, composition is how all the elements that you have placed on your design, how they work together, how they complement each other, and create a visual harmony when people look at it. And there's a visual example here by the right. The credit also goes to Kyle Anthony on X. You can see that there are some text here on this piece of design, and everything is properly done in a way that complements each other. The image here adds beauty to the design. There is an ultra text here by the right, and we can see that for a first look, this design actually work. The elements on this design actually work together when we look at it visually. The ultra here introduces this piece of brand presentation from Kyle Anthony, and we can see that he wrote some things here about ultra, then continuous operation here. So in essence, composition is basically how the elements on your design, how they all work together, how they complement each other. So why does this matter? Why do we have layout in design? Why is it necessary to have layout? Without layout, information becomes confusing. Users get overwhelmed and attention gets lost. Imagine when there's no layout in our designs, like the informations will all look jacked up, and people will be confused on what we are really trying to communicate. And in the end, we'll finally lose their attention as they move on to the next piece of design, or the next thing they are looking on their phone or website. So there's a visual example here by the right. You can imagine that this man is lost. We don't know whether he's going to move to the right or move to the left. This is what happens when the design doesn't have a proper layout. People will be confused. They really don't know what you are trying to communicate with your design. And now there's a beginner problem. Most beginners place things randomly, overcrowd layout, ignore spacing, and make everything loud. There is this wrong belief when you start out with design. There's this wrong belief that with layout you have to make everything loud, like you have to make everything on that piece of design scream for attention, which is wrong. And now, what is the goal that we seek to achieve with layout and composition as a designer? The goal we are trying to achieve is to control how people see information. to control how people see information, because when we control how people see information, then we can achieve our own aims of making them read what we really want them to read, making them see what is really important in that design. Now, what is visual hierarchy? Just like the word hierarchy means order, and when we add visual to that, we can say visual hierarchy is the order in which people notice information. Visual hierarchy is the order in which people notice information, in the sense that the way you place some elements on your design will determine which one people will see first. And there's a visual example here by the right. Credit also goes to Kyle Anthony on X. We can see this illustration at the top. There's also another illustration at the bottom, and there's one at the last end below, or top segment, the below section of the design. And why do we have visual hierarchy? Is to help us as designer point our attention to what we really want people to see in the design. And now looking at this, someone else might see this ultra first, but I believe most people will see these illustrations first, and even before we read what is written on them. So why does hierarchy matters in the design? Hierarchy matters. Hierarchy answers some questions. What do I see first? What matters most? What should I read next? And let me take that again. Hierarchy answers, what do I see first? What matters most? What should I read next? And there's a visual example here by the right. Looking at this, I personally saw the image of this person in this poster first, before I even look at the drafted at the top. So now looking at this, the designer might be trying to point our attention to the person in the image, to the person in this image on the flyer. His name is Serge Trick, and the credit also goes to Kyle Anthony on Hex. And now we have drafted at the top. So basically, this image is the focal point of this design, because it's the part that gets the most attention. So why do we have hierarchy? Hierarchy helps us as designer to guide our viewers' attention to what really matters in that design, what we want them to see first. And there are also real world examples of what I've been saying so far. This is a brand design presentation done by Carl Anthony on X, and we can see Text Lab New York City built to optimize human potential. And this is a proper use of layout and visual hierarchy. Looking at this, there's enough margin spacing between elements, and the top four corners are evenly spaced. So hierarchy controls attention, like I said earlier. Hierarchy controls attention. And as designers, we are supposed to guide our viewers' eyes intentionally. We are supposed to help them see what is really important on a piece of design. And there's a visual example here by the right. We have, this is for a movie poster, Sony, James Peterson, and Judy Kenwood. And the most focal point of this design to me is this our love story text in the middle. And then secondly, I would say the image, and then the character names and the logo at the top. So looking at this, the designers probably guiding our attention to the main title of the movie, which is our love story. And there are tools for hierarchy. We have size, we have weight, color, contrast, position, space, and other ones, but these are the ones we'll be looking at for the sake of this training. And these are the practical application of hierarchy. And when it comes to size, large element, because we can see the text, a large element is bigger and it attracts attention first. Large elements attract attention first. The large element here is bigger than the text below it. And when it comes to weight, both typography attracts attention more than light typography, as illustrated here. And in terms of color, bright accent color draws focus. In terms of space, isolated element becomes more important. You can see that this top text is isolated from the rest of this text. And in terms of position, top center placement gains attention. And now we are going to be looking at guiding the eye. To guide the eye of your viewers as a designer, we have to use alignment, spacing, contrast, and directional shapes. And there are common hierarchy mistakes there are common hierarchy mistakes in design. And number one is when you make everything too bold, You make everything colorful, and there's no focal point in your design. At the end of the day, you won't really communicate anything of substantial value to your target audience. Now we also have grid systems. We have grid system. So what is a grid? A grid is basically a structural framework, and there's some tools that have these inbuilt grid features like CorelDRAW and Adobe Illustrator and so on and so forth. So the reasons why we have grid is to basically ensure that your design is properly aligned. So why does designers use grid? Why designers use grids? Grids create consistency, alignment, balance, and order. I'll take it again. Grids help you to create consistency in your design. It helps you to ensure that the elements in your design are properly aligned, and it also adds visual balance to your design, and it also gives order to your design. It gives order to the visual elements on your design. So we have different type of grid types, but for the sake of this training, we're looking at just these examples. We have the single column grid, multi-column, and modular grids. Single column grids are commonly used in articles and blogs. Two column grids are commonly used in presentations and websites. Multicolor grids are commonly used in editorial and magazine layouts, and modular grids are used in boxes and structured systems. And why does it feel like when you see grids on a design, it looks professional? Why grids feel professional? This is because they create rhythm and consistency. And looking at this magazine design, credit goes to Carl Anthony on X. We can see some use of grids here in this design. Looking at the line below the factory floor and redefine, and looking at the overall section here, it kind of gives a kind of consistency and visual balance when we look at it, and it helps the elements in the design look properly organized. So we're looking at white space. What is white space? We've explored white space in some of our past trainings, but we'll look over it again. So what is white space? White space is basically the empty space around our elements, like the empty space around our elements. Follow the arrow on my screen. The white space, the empty space around our elements. And there is a visual example here, by the way. This is for a football poster done for Jude Bellingham. So why does it matter? White space creates breathing room on a piece of design, and visual reliefs. It also creates visual relief, and visual relief improves readability. And looking at this piece of design, you can easily look at the images on the left and the text which is in the middle of the flyer. And one of the biggest misunderstanding with beginners is that we often believe that when the space around our design is empty, it's like we are wasting space. No, you are not wasting space. And actually having a lot of sufficient white space in your design helps your design to breathe. It adds visual relief to your design, and it also improves readability. So white space and hierarchy. Spacing helps to define importance on a piece of design. White space and composition. Spacing shapes visual rhythm. And there are best practices for what we have been discussing so far for layout and composition. Best practices for layout and composition. Number one is start with hierarchy. Use grids. Leave breathing room. Avoid overcrowding, and guide the eye intentionally. And start with hierarchy. Ensure that your design, the visual elements are placed in order of importance you want them to appear. And in terms of grids, make sure you use grids so that your design elements are properly aligned. And also leave breathing room. Leave enough white space around your design, and also avoid overcrowding your design with unnecessary elements, like things that are not related to the design should not be there. You have to remove them and only put what is important. And also guide the eye intentionally, like put your visual element in a way that you want to guide your audience. You want them to see what is important, and you guide their eye towards it intentionally. So for this week, we have two assignments. The first assignment is design an eye-catching cover for a fashion magazine featuring a striking image of a model. The primary text at the top section should read evolve. So for the first assignment is just to use the word, the copy evolve. This is at the top section of the cover of the magazine. You can make it bold or play around the type as you wish. And secondly, make sure your design effectively utilizes hierarchy, visual composition, and white space.